From Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with the 31 days of gangster films and police films from the year 1970 to the present. And it is my hope that this can afford us, you and me, my dear friends, with the opportunity to be able to speak about as many films as possible over the course of these 31 days in the context of these absorbing and epic genres of cinema, those being the gangster film genre and the police film genre, respectively. Today, and specifically for this video, I'd like to focus in on the gangster film genre. And I have a film that is regarded by many as being so special, so magnificent, so mysterious. One of the great landmarks, one of the great milestones, one of the great masterpieces of the gangster genre, indeed of the film of the films of this this filmmaker extraordinaire, this maestro of cinema. This is a film that is described as being from 1984, although of course there have been a number of versions that have been released over time, including somewhat recently, for purposes of home video, physical media releases, etc. Be that as it may, it has existed over time since the 80s, and ever since I first saw it on, say, VHS, and since those times, I have been always mesmerized by this film. This is a hypnotic film. It has hypnotized me, and I know many others, under its spell, which is a deep and wide-spreading one. Its spell of magic is captivating, alluring. It leads to mystery upon mystery. As we are watching a film that is, admittedly, on the one hand, about gangsters, about crimes, about youth, and about friendships over time, over a wide span of years, and how those friendships are tested in the context of ever-growing crime and crime organization and risk and danger and life and death stakes. This is the stuff of gangster film genre, right? Crime film genre. While all this is going on, of course, we have a film that is, in a sense, casting its incredibly deep magical spell on the viewers, on me, for example, such that every time I watch this film, I am left wondering, I am captivated, but I'm also left wondering what it is I'm seeing. Am I seeing something that is a type of heightened realism play? Or am I seeing something that is more ephemeral? Am I seeing something that is like an illusion or a dream? And if that's the case, then what am I seeing? Am I seeing something that is being played out in kind of quote-unquote real time? Or is it something that is more subjective and more ultra-personalized and thus more psychological than meets the eye? And the more I watch it, the more fascinated I become, because the mysteries become further emboldened and they become further heightened, thus leading to more captivation and leading to more feelings of being enchanted and enthralled, thus leaving me wanting more every time. And I always come back with that feeling of wanting to watch it again and again and again. This is the magic and power of this brilliant film. I'm speaking again of the film that is described as being released in 1984, and it has a great cast, included in which are James Woods and Robert De Niro, and it is from the director, who is Sergio Leone. And I'm speaking of this work here. Once upon a time in America, Once Upon a Time in America this is one of the most hypnotic films in the genre. This is one of the most hypnotic films in the genre. This is a classic through and through. It is a milestone work through and through. And as I've mentioned before, one of the aspects of this film is the, say, rise and maybe fall over a span of many, many years, over this type of cross-cutting between times, between time periods, the lives of these kids who have grown up together through many hard times in New York, and they grow up and they grow into adults. And over the course of their lives, we see their friendships, their bonds, their various adventures, mini adventures, their interactions, their good times and maybe not so good times. And we also see amongst that, or in parallel to that, or in fact, as part of that, intertwined with that, their engagements, either indirectly or directly, with what will end up being a type of life in crime. And we are speaking of the characters here, Deborah and Max and Noodles. And so we have these characters over time as kids, then growing up into adulthood, and how their relationships are affected over time and with these various events that happen, how they are friends with each other, how those friendships are emboldened and strengthened, or indeed how they are tested and broken, and how betrayal leads to betrayal, and how that type of betrayal can lead to guilt and remorse that can haunt people for years and years and years on end, only to perhaps discover or perhaps find out that what we have always thought was the case over many, many years might not necessarily be so. In other words, what might have been something that seemingly to us was one way when it met one's eye ended up being something completely different. And what that therefore means to the overall complexity of the nature of guilt, remorse, friendship, and betrayal set against the backdrop of crime and petty crime and significant crime and gangsters and youth and children growing into adults and the criminal organization empire, etc., etc. So what that means in the context or against the backdrop of those gangster film story arcs, but also what it means in the context of looking back, and also the figuring in of this work of cinema in that dynamic, because what we understand here too is, because of its structure, because of this film's incredibly complex structure, how it goes from time period to time period, seemingly going from one period to another period, yet to another period, and going back, old age, youthful adults, younger children, that type of jumping back and forth through time. We begin to realize or understand, first of all, the passage of time and the burden of years, racked with guilt, racked with a sense of a perspective on what one thought took place over years. And when one is confronted with the possibility that indeed it might have been a totally different case altogether, how one begins to be able to process that, both on an intellectual level and on an emotional level, and what the results might be as that is being processed. So that's one area of concern going on, and that is one of the key components of the Noodles character, the Robert De Niro character, and Robert De Niro as a young adult and beyond. The Noodles character as a young adult and beyond, excuse me. And so that becomes one of the key foundational aspects, I would suggest, of a film like Once Upon a Time in America, namely how his character is dealing with the burden of guilt, the burden of time, the burden with what he has done or what he thinks he has done, and how that is, how his journey at the start of the film is in many ways his attempt at trying to revisit the past, as well as trying to figure out what is going on in the present. And that becomes this super epic journey with him at the center, in a manner of speaking. And that means, too, that through his recollections and through his telling of the tale, while he is trying to figure out what is going on in the present, we begin to realize the deep-rooted connections and how that has to do with not just the levels of crime and all these various subplot episodes that he experienced over the many, many years, but how they have these fine connections, or maybe even very pronounced connections, emboldened connections with what he understands piece by piece is happening in the present. It has everything to do with his relationship with Max, with his relationship with Deborah, with his relationship with everyone. And so this becomes the foundational process, if you will, the structure upon which this film operates. And it is a brilliant one. Now, let me just now take a step back here and say that it's operating on so many levels. One such level is, say, the way in which this film uses this story or these conceits and tries to, maybe in a subtle way, interweave the concept or notion of the rise and fall, the success story, the American dream, if you will, set against the backdrop of a kind of history or fabric, historical fabric or tableau of the United States, of the rise of the American dream type of story, and how that has elements too of politics and geopolitics, and also even perhaps corruption and the like, and that also leads to links between what happened in the past and also what is happening in the present. And so this becomes one of the powerfully applied conceits by Sergio Leone and company, both in terms of the plot, but also in terms of the thematic flow and also the visual style and also the music. God Bless America. This is a very important fundamental concept that is used to great effect in some very crucial, critical scenes in this film. And that is, I think, meant to further convey or suggest the way in which this film seems to be showing the charting or of the example of the rise and fall of the American dream in the context of the story of, say, Noodles and Max and others. Perhaps also even linking to concepts not just of dreams, but also corruption. So this is one level upon which this film operates so brilliantly and so majestically. And yet another level that it operates on is the idea of the ephemeral nature, the dreamlike quality, the hallucination, the illusion, the magic spell of this type of cinema. Now, we understand that this is also looking back. This is also about guilt. This is also about betrayal, or what one might perceive as being betrayal. Let me put it that way. Now, with these various very complex human-based emotional points that are established, we also understand that a lot of this film and its quirks and its editing techniques and its styles and its way of jumping back and forth, a lot of the quirks of the film are what make it so magical. There are some very inexplicable moments. There are some very mysterious, quite shocking moments in terms of what we are seeing before our very eyes, and they begin to allow us, the viewers, to question the reality of the situation, which is a brilliant concept. In other words, we begin to wonder, is it what we are seeing on screen really what happened? Or is this truly and utterly subjective experience that we are experiencing and as viewers? In that case, is what we are seeing really, quote unquote, real? Or is it all an illusion? Is it some kind of psychological based portrait, or is it a subjective psychological viewpoint of one character looking back, maybe racked with so much guilt that maybe the way in which this character is looking back on points in times past maybe is his way of trying to remedy a certain situations or certain mistakes that he might have made when he was a young man, etc. So this could be a wholly subjective experience that we are experiencing in the form of the cinema. So that is one thing. And or it could be a wholly dream, hallucination, illusion quality thus meaning that the film is entirely possibly ephemeral from a certain interpretation perspective. It could be just a whole figment of an imagination of a character. It could be a dream sequence. It could be just a magic trick, whether it's a drug-induced or otherwise. And so this leads to the allure and the charm and the mystery of the film. And we as viewers begin to inspect and wonder and question about, say, specific editing choices, specific jump cuts, certain lines of dialogue, sudden maybe moments of plot that seem maybe, as one thinks about it, maybe quite nonsensical. But this is part of the point of the film. It brings us in like this with the directness of the plot on the one hand, and it adds these layers of inexplicable mystery via the cinematic technique and also via the emotional stakes of the story. And that intertwining, that cross-section of different avenues at the same time leading to this point, which is Once Upon a Time in America. This is what makes this film so brilliant, so utterly, utterly brilliant. And yet another level that this film operates on such brilliance is the performances. You know, the great performances here. I must say we have the characters over time, and the children growing into adults and then growing into older adults. So the advancing of years and the advancing of time, the advancing of age. And so this becomes a very important aspect in the performance. One must feel the energy of the times, or one must feel the burden of years, depending on the time period that one finds oneself in the point of the story. And so this is conveyed so well in these performances. And as I say, the crucial aspect is the human relationships, the emotional relationships between what could be said to be the main characters of Max, who in the adult years is portrayed by James Woods, and Deborah, who is Elizabeth McGovern, and Noodles, who is Robert De Niro. And so these relationships are so fundamental. These are so fundamental, and they involve, as I say, intense loyalties and friendships. They also involve betrayals. They also involve really terrible and horrible mistakes, and even shocking mistakes, and shocking affronts, unforgivable acts. And so what this means too is that these friendships and betrayals are tested, and my goodness, are they tested? They are tested in this intensely dramatic way, in an emotionally abrupt way, as well as being feeling the sweep of the warmth of friendship. You know, the warmer the friendships are, the colder the betrayals feel. So this is all on display. And what is so great about a film like Once Upon a Time in America, especially dealing with our main character, who is the Noodles character, Robert De Niro's character, is that it does not shy away from showing us not just the strengths and almost the heroic aspects or anti-heroic aspects of Noodles, but also shows us the frailties and the weaknesses, and indeed, yes, the ugly side, the very, very ugly side of his character. And so we are given a very complex portrait of a man who has not just weaknesses, but who makes some very terrible mistakes and who commits some really terrible things. And given that entire big picture, we begin to feel the burden that he himself must be feeling as the years progress and as age and time take its toll, etc. And while that is intertwined, not just with his own personal story, but also intertwined with the story, the directness of the plot, and the mystery, and the money, and the crime, and the betrayal, as well as who are these figures, what is going on in the present, and etc., etc. So it is all in this ball of energy. One of the levels upon which this film operates so well is the performances, showing off these very complex relationships. And then tying back to what was said earlier is, are these really what it is we're watching? Are these relationships really what is quote-unquote happening in the reality of the film? Or is this indeed somewhat of a figment of the imagination of the characters? Who knows? But then that is part of the allure and charm and the hypnotizing aspect of this film, Once Upon a Time in America, which leads me to yet another level upon which the film rests its brilliance on, which is namely the way in which it's put together. I mean, we have the sweeping scope of the film. We have the way that music is intertwined. Ennio Morricone's score is one of the great scores. I mean, Morricone, excuse me, is world renowned, right? The one of the greats, and his score here for Once Upon a Time in America. I mean, indeed, his work with Sergio Leone overall, legend, the stuff of legend. Here is an example of that stuff of legend. The score for Once Upon a Time in America is one of the greats. Really is. It packs a punch every time. There is a way in which a type of musical instrument, like a pan flute sound, echoes hauntingly over the course of various key moments of the soundtrack, and it lingers. It really does, and you can feel the sense of time in that. The Morricone music is utterly magical and utterly key. And we have other key songs here as well that are very important. I mentioned God Bless America. I should also mention the way in which a particular song called Yesterday is being used here, also very important in the context of time and looking back and cutting back and forth between time periods. So that is one aspect of the style. And then, of course, the Sergio Leone look and feel. This is an epic film, but it's an epic film that whose epic landscapes are the human heart and the human soul and the relationship dynamics, as well as the sweep of history. I mean, in many ways, right, Leone is a true artist in being able to do this. He's able to use the geography of time and space and have that be the geography of the human heart and the human soul every time. And that juxtaposition, that way of combining metaphor for a film like Once Upon a Time in America is utterly magnificent. I mean, there are some shots here that are truly epic, that show the growth in space and expanse of New York on the one hand, the historical significance of New York on the one hand, and the feel of the time on the space itself on the one hand. But then we understand that that is utterly linked to the growth in space and expanse and passage of time as it plays out, not just on the physical beings of the characters, but also their hearts and souls as well. So this magic that Leone is able to capture in this film is one of a kind, utterly special. And I should say, finally, too, that one of the key points, I would say, about Leone's work overall, leading up to this brilliant film, Once Upon a Time in America, is the close-up. The close-up on the face of the characters. Whenever there is a close-up in a Leone film, it is a significant one. It is there for a reason. It is there for a purpose. And also note, too, whenever there is a close-up of a person on a person's face and that person smiles, this is also a very important aspect. Whenever you have a close-up and that the face then turns into a smile. Now, you have that in a number of films by Sergio Leone, and you have that in some really significant moments, I would say, in this film, Once Upon a Time in America. Whenever that happens, stand back, because this is like what's the feeling? I feel like it's like lightning charged through my body as a viewer watching this. It's the tingling experience. This is why I love movies. This is why I love movies, is to experience moments like this. You have to see it to believe it type of magic. And it's exemplified in the close-up and the smile. Whenever you have a film like Once Upon a Time in America from Sergio Leone, this is the stuff of legend. What a great, great film this is. Sergio Leone's work, Once Upon a Time in America. Okay, my dear friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well. And please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies, including Once Upon a Time in America, if you haven't already. And if you have, watch it again. Watch it. I will as soon as this video is over. Wow. All right, my dear friends. Until we meet again, thank you so much, and cheers.